Welcome back, folks. And now it's my privilege to welcome our next presenter, Dr. Laura Bava. Laura Bava is a board-certified pediatric psychologist in the Survivorship and Supportive Care Program in the Cancer and Blood Disease Institute at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. She is a fellow in the APA Minority Fellowship. She was recently named co-director of the CSCLA Adolescent and Young Adult Service, which provides behavioral health support in English and Spanish for adolescents and young adults and their families. Dr. Bava has a clinical and research focus on culturally competent services for underserved populations, particularly Latinx communities. Please welcome Dr. Bava.
Thank you for that kind introduction. And now I'm gonna navigate the technology, so bear with me. So if anybody can shoot me a message saying that you're seeing what we're supposed to see.
Yes, we see your slide.
Perfect. Good morning. It's thank you so much for inviting me to talk to you today. And we are going to be talking about the services that I have been working on for about 7 years now. Formerly, this service was called Teen and Family Support Services. So if you see both names, we're talking about the same thing. After a couple of years, we realized we needed to merge and create like a more robust and comprehensive service, but the psychosocial part remained the same. These are our objectives for today. Hopefully I can cover them all and leave some time for questions and answers and discussions. So I really look forward to your participation. While I'm very excited to present here today at the Health Equity Summit, I also want to remind ourselves that we are always working towards health equity, because although working at the individual level is very important, it's not enough. And we have to be always mindful of the structural barriers and systems that feed to these. So it's always important, I think, to think what can we do to help our families today, but at the same time, what structures can we impact? And those are things at the policy level, law, which hinder access and promote the health inequities that we have seen historically. I want to give you some background. I think we're all from Los Angeles, but I don't want to assume that we are. So Children's Hospital is in the center here of, Hollywood, know where the stars are, but I want to give you some background in terms of what our population looked like. So these are some of the stats from the census, and our hospital really serves and represents well our catchment area. So I want to bring your attention to the stats at the bottom, which indicates that perhaps we have an overrepresentation of children under public health insurance, which is not surprising because we do see the patients around here, which are impacted by lower socioeconomic status, and other indicators associated with that. So I want to shift the conversation. Is not so much about ethnicity, but many of the times we're addressing the socioeconomic status. The other background that I want to provide, because I don't want to assume that everybody speaks AYA, is AYA stands for Adolescent and Young Adult, and is this percentage of the population that is very unique within cancer services. cancer and blood diseases between the ages of 59 to 39. Here at CHLA, we have started our services at 13, which are not officially AYAs, but we want to acknowledge the developmental stage. And we see patients about 21, 22, depending on. This is, although a very rare situation, they are only 4% of the total cancer population. They are much more likely to be diagnosed than children. It is the number one cause of death due to illness. They have very different presentation than a little child or an adult, not a young adult, an adult or an elder person. And clearly they have specific needs. That is absolutely understood. And most of those specific needs have to do with psychosocial aspects. So we all agree that really adolescent and young adult cancer is different and requires different approaches. Some of the specific needs that we know are these things of being in the middle, not being, they have a sense of independence, they have agency. You'll see them later on the panel. Please join and you will hear from them directly. But they are in the middle. They're not totally independent. They're also not totally, independent. Their communication needs vary significantly. We do put a lot more demands on the adolescents and young adults during their treatment because they understand everything and they're the best reporters of their symptoms. So how we communicate with them is different. Sometimes, although they can understand anything, they may not want to make all the decisions or they may not want to hear all the information. So their communication needs is different. They also have specific treatment needs. The type of cancers they get, the biology is different. Where do they get served? Some of the adolescents and young adults 18 and above get served in the community, not in specialized cancer centers like the one where I work. So, and the kind of care, if you think pediatrics and adult care is completely different. So, where do they receive the care matters. And their participation in clinical trials is also an aspect that it continues to be looked on because not only for the trials that are available, but also their engagement on it. It's, even though a lot has been moving in this field, it is an emerging field, so we need a lot more knowledge. And particularly if you look at the research, our patient population in general and patients from diverse backgrounds tend not to be represented on the literature. So, and another big point is that that is key for this group is the concepts of transition and transfer of care. Transfer of care is when they go to a different setting, but transitions are happening all the time from where they are on their process, as well as, transitioning responsibilities, transitioning from high school to college or employment. So this is a big topic in this group. And another very unique and problematic aspect, especially in terms of equity, is the issue of fertility preservation, who can afford that, male versus females, and also side effects of their treatments impacting their sexuality and what kind of service we can provide them with as well. So at CHLA, this was the response that we came out with about a year and a half or a year. We rebranded it in terms of elevating the psychosocial aspect at the same level that the medical aspect is led by Dr. Shes Kutara on the oncology side and by me in the psychosocial side. It's one of the few services in the country. There are a few services that have parity. So we're very proud of that in terms of having the oncologists and the psychologists working together. We are a clinical research service focused on adolescents and young adults. We want to provide excellent care and also transdisciplinary comprehensive care. And of course, our goal is to improve the disease and after treatment experience, as well as the medical psychosocial outcomes. We want to reduce the distress because we know that the stress exists and is very prevalent, may not be at the clinical level. Not everybody reaches clinical significance, but there is a level of distress, which could be normal, or sometimes it becomes more problematic and requires additional services. All of these services are free, are preventive, and therefore they're not reimbursable. So this part of the service relies entirely on philanthropy. The other thing that we wanted to do was really, when we build the services, response to the science, like I was saying before, respond to the guidelines that are out there, and really have a conversation. So some of the things that we build specifically are responding to these standards. Most of you probably are familiar with the standards. The bar is very high with the standards, but we try. And throughout the service, perhaps you can see flavors of the response to this specific standard. Systematic assessment, having support throughout the continuum of care, providing a wealth of psychoeducation, aiming for adjustment, and providing social opportunity for social interactions. In a nutshell, if we think through an health equity lens, we really want to provide psychosocial care that includes and views the patients as a whole person. So we look at the biopsychosocial aspects. When working with adolescents, the same way as children, we also want to make it patient-centered and family-centered. So we try to meet families where they are, and that includes language, culture, socioeconomic background, preference, and we also, like I was indicating before, we need to keep very in mind the broader structures that are impacting our patients and our families and impact their well-being. Cancer from lung diseases is one of the things that they have to deal with, which very challenging, but sometimes they face 3 or 4 challenges at the same time while dealing with the diagnosis and treatment, like housing insecurity, like food insecurity, like challenges with the educational system, or community violence. So this is how the patients present. It's not just the cancer. And some of them don't have any of those things. So we really have to pay attention to all of it. And all of these things clearly impact the access to care and their resources, like problems with transportation, or where is their nearest emergencies, room, and how they adapt and adjust to these processes. We really work collaboratively, even though the psychosocial arm is just me running it. We always work as a team. We really engage everybody that is here, providing services, social work, child life, the oncologists, the nurses, volunteers, and we really seek to be highly integrated with the medical care. Another thing that I, like Mario indicated, I really have been working on is this issue of culturally competent and culturally humility, into the care. We really have to present, this is a tenet that embeds the services as well. And it speaks to this need to pay attention to the context, really to know your population and to not reinvent the wheel. This has principles, has standards, and this involves, again, other aspects of the services provided here at the hospital. Another thing that some of you may or may not be familiar, that it manifests more in the research, but also in the type of service delivery, is this concept of cultural adaptation. So when we provide interventions, we need to be sometimes make modifications in terms of how we deliver these interventions. There's common things that we pay attention to is, again, cultural values, the language of the patient and family, their context, and literacy level, and that includes electronic literacy, like myself, which it sometimes can be problematic, and also the way that we develop content and the way that we deliver. And this is, again, not something we invented, but something that follows the national standards. So now let's pivot to specific, with all these contexts, with all these considerations, we build services. And I came up with this name because I think something that is fascinating about working with adolescents and young adults, and it's something that is probably also the most challenging, is this concept of building it while flying. We always have to be on our toes, and what worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. And this is a very, very ever-changing population with a lot of needs. It's not the same, a survivor of childhood cancer who is an AYA, that an AYA that gets diagnosed at 18, or an AYA that gets diagnosed at 15, or an AYA is 39, which we don't see here, CHLA, so I'm not going to speak to that portion of the population. So this is a very known graphic depiction of the most common and important things that we need to address with adolescents and young adults, and include interactions with the medical setting, as well as access to care. And if you pay attention, about 90% of those have to do with psychosocial aspects. That's why it was important for our service to really put the biology and the psychology together. Next to it, that's a modification of the chart that I would like to add to. There's some specific things that we see in our population. So for example, in terms of future plans and academic goals, a lot of our patients are first generation US students. So many of them cannot go to their parents, or sometimes they go to their siblings if they have some, in terms of having a base knowledge in how to interact with community college applications, FAFSA, all of those things. So when we have, this big aspect of academics and future plans, we really need to pay attention to those things. Many of our patients experience cultural differences between they were born and raised here with their own family of origin sometimes, or with the community at large. It's not very uncommon that our patients prefer English and the parents prefer Spanish. So there are also language differences. Some of our patients experience immigration concerns, deportation concerns for themselves or for family members. That is something that is heavy on their mind, especially when interfacing a lot with institutions. These fears can become more prevalent. Finances is a big concern for our patients. They often indicate they feel a burden to their family. They are concerned about their parents struggling with money. They are well aware of it. And many times they also experience a role reversal. They are the first ones to hear news and understand news if their parents don't speak English. So if you think about from diagnosis, they may hear what's going on with them first, and then the parent through the interpretation. So many times when they need help, they may not report that they need help because they're used to, reversing the role or taking care of themselves or things like that. Of course, families are always, we have to explain this to the families and to the teenagers so they can ask for help. Like I said before, we do know that there is a psychological level of distress that is evident, and especially, not surprisingly, at a specific time. Diagnosis, relapse if it occurs, end of treatment could be a very exciting time, but also a very burdening time. and transitions, like I said. We also know there is a level of post-traumatic stress that is present, but also we know that it's a level of post-traumatic growth. We see a lot of resiliency in our patients. We see a lot of positive outcomes. However, those are not reflected on the literature. So more work needs to be done there. These processes start from diagnosis to the end of treatment and to long-term care. So really, we try to provide services throughout the continuum of care, except for one of the services that I will explain later, one of the offerings. Everything else really includes everybody along the continuum. So in all of our activities, you can have somebody that has been fairly recent diagnosed and somebody that has been off treatment 10 years. We do know losses are real in this group, and it could be losses of functional status. Some of our patients, have to stop doing what they love. It's not uncommon for our patients that were able to play a sport not be able to play it later if the cancer impacts their limbs. Losses in terms of groups. Sometimes our patients have to stay behind or lose their group of reference. Losses in terms of body image, and some other losses. Some of our patients, fortunately, have to see their friends not survive. So we know that 35% report some kind of clinical significant distress at the first year. So the first year is really something that tends to be very heavily loaded, and that's where we also we match with the service in providing more things at the beginning. These are some of the common concerns, even when they're done with treatment, relapse, worrying about parents, friends, peers, siblings. That's a big concern that I did not put there. And also the feeling of social isolation. Over the years, feelings of isolation, despite all the changes in being connected, remain big problem. So this is some statements for the AYA week, and some people claim this is the number one issue for adolescents and young adults. And I would say not always, not throughout the entire time, but at times, yes, this is one of the biggest one. And this is another thing that we heavily try to address. Also, we know, contrary to common belief, mostly in providers, medical providers especially, and many of our parents, the issue of support groups. So common beliefs are, you should join a support group. Do you have a support group? And what we hear from our patients on the other square is the reality. No, thank you. I have my own friends. I don't want to meet anybody else. It really helps if you talk about it. Although I believe that, what we hear from them is, I don't want to talk about it. So we create spaces where we don't talk about it, but we acknowledge it. And another common belief in the community is that everybody going through cancer needs a psychologist or a therapist, which is also not true. Like I said, a lot of our patients do not meet clinical criteria for services. They may have some level of distress that is important and we want to address, but they don't need clinical services. And another myth is that psychological care is funded and is provided at the same level that medical care, which is not also true. As we say, we rely entirely on philanthropy because if we go preventive, all those services are not supported. So what we did was conceptualize the service as a support without the support group. And we really, I communicate this very clearly to the adolescents and young adults, because again, every time we say support group, they're like, not interested. So some of the tenets that we create in that extra layer of support through the AYA services, a lot of normalization. Is this that you're experiencing typical for what you're going through, for your age, for your cancer, for your surroundings? A lot of psychoeducation. We really believe in empowerment, helping the teenagers and the families navigate this the best way possible. We work heavily on the part of social integration. We want them to keep their friends, to keep the relationship, to enhance those, to problem solve if anything arises, but also to enhance their community. We provide these, like I say, around the continuum of care from diagnosis to survivorship. We heavily focus on skill training because of the developmental tasks that this group needs to accomplish. And really, we try to create connections and spaces for connections. So like I indicated, the first year tends to be the most challenging, perhaps. And this issue of who needs what, when, we wanted to address that. So as most of you are aware, psychosocial services are provided. Psychological services, however, tend to be based on referral. We really do not provide the services to everybody walking through the door, and neither we should be providing services to everybody. That we need to know what they need. So one thing that we implemented is this systematic behavioral health assessment and triage, currently through a clinical interview, but hopefully we're going to include a more systematic measures so we can compare our patients with the general population. And it will give us a more robust assessment. So this behavioral health assessment is offered to everybody that is newly diagnosed, experience a relapse, or is having a second malignancy, a different cancer than the original one. We coordinate very closely with the medical team. And from this assessment, we link as quickly as we can to additional psychological services that could be here at CHLA, in our oncology service, or in our behavioral health center, or in the community. And like I said, heavy loaded on the behavioral health education. So what is typical? Understanding how, getting an understanding how the patients have been coping before. So really emphasize things that are going well and really flag the things that maybe need more tweaking or services. Sleep is a big problem. Nobody sleeps at the hospital, but sometimes those sleep problems remain at home. Also because of lack of routine, sleep tends to be very affected. And again, communication. I cannot emphasize enough. So you are seeing a copy of the flyer. When I do my behavioral health assessment, I get, all my handouts, and these are the areas that I assess and present and discuss. And I leave these with the patients and introduce them to the service. Also, during that assessment, we use, I use this, that we're going to provide the link to these. This is a wonderful resource for the Children Oncology Group. A lot of our parents receive like the Children's Oncology book manual. This is the brief version for the patients that are adolescents and young adults. It's very, it's not heavy, it's not a big book. So it comes in English and Spanish and French. And it's really something that I provide the adolescents and go through it with them. And in the back of the pages, it has like 20 additional resources. So it's a wonderful thing that is available. It's also available online, so you can, really download it yourself. And the other thing that you're seeing right now is also a very simplified handout of organizations that are nationwide, and some of them also outside the US, that the patients can access that are forums for adolescents and young adults. Teen Cancer American and 1330 are more geared towards, adolescents. Stupid Cancer is a little bit more for the young adults, so I let them know of this. And you see at the top, the National Cancer Institute. This is not geared towards adolescent and young adult, but this is there because everybody Googles, everybody searches. So we want to make sure that our patients and family go to a very reputable source and can read information that is well put together. And the NIH website is truly, truly bilingual in Spanish. When you click Spanish, the whole site is in Spanish. It's not Google Translate. So it's a really good source. So we talk about that as well. What have you read? Where are you going for your information? Please, go to these sites that you're gonna find helpful. The other arm, so that's the front-loading arm. That's a big percentage of how I spend my time is triaging, providing brief intervention, psychoeducation, and it's not one and all. Sometimes I need to revisit. Sometimes patients are doing well at intake, but then things change. So it really gives us a more fluid tool to be able to intervene as fast as we can. Again, we're trying to be preventive. The other arm is all these opportunities for socialization, again, embedded heavily with the standards and with things that we know clinically, psychologically, that our adolescents and young adults need, but that address the issue of don't bring me to a support group. So these are all group-based interventions that we have two series. One is the wellness series, and another one is the life skills that I'm going to show you next. And wellness have everything to do with communication, coping skills, social relationships, and but we do it through fun, pizza, and community. Many of these are workshops, and we offer them every month and a half. We are returning now after the pandemic. We were really shut down during the pandemic, and we really seek out talent and bring collaborators to help us do these. So we usually have something that it has to do with learning something, and then we implement what is the topic through these activities. And many times these are open to sometimes the patient and their AYA siblings, if the patient wants to bring the sibling, which it provides wonderful opportunities for siblings also to benefit from the topics. And there's similar concerns, like our educational workshops, many of our patients' siblings also need guidance with that. And sometimes we run parallel groups. So sometimes we have patients and siblings working in something and parents working on something else in the next room, which I really enjoy because everybody's safe, having a good time, and then they all can share their experiences. The other line of services that we have is this life skills series, and this one focuses again on developmental tasks that the adolescents and young adults have to meet. So it's a lot about education and employment. So again, social skills comes in here too, how to respond to emails, how to inquire about things, how to fill out an application, how to understand the educational system, how to utilize resources in the community. And these were 3 things that we did. Again, similar format. These ones are a little bit more teaching, but not always. The other big thing that we do is really outreach and invite the patients to participate on things in the community to represent. A lot of people have no concept of what an adolescent and young adult with cancer looks like, leave alone their needs. These is things that we were invited to. Again, we rely a lot on invitations. You are seeing there Lamstrong, Matt Lamson, who has a foundation called Lamstrong that is used to be playing at the Galaxy and is a collaborator for the service and one of the donors as well. And he is an AYA cancer survivor himself. His story is very public, so you can look it up. And then we also participate in the Walk and Light the Night, where patients lead the team. So everything that we can really participate and create awareness and benefits our patients, we're, game for. And especially we can have fun. Who doesn't like to go be on the field of, in a soccer game? Another thing that we have is our most popular event that just happened last weekend, which takes tremendous work on my part, and it's really a life-changing event, which is our adolescent and young adult retreat. It's funded by the Go for the Goal Foundation. We are very thankful for that, and this allows us with free of charge for our patients to take about 40 adolescents and young adults on treatment, off treatment, and go to the Camp Ronald McDonald site. We partner with them. We hire we get their facilities and the counselors. In the middle here, you're seeing a former adolescent and young adult that discovered through working with our dietitian that he really wanted to pursue cooking. Here you can see maybe it says Chef Money. That name is the name that he acquired at camp. So when he went to the first time to our retreat, he found kind of like this passion about cooking and say, okay, I want to pursue this, have time to think about it. And then this is him after graduating, leading one of our sessions. That's why he has the formal attire. And here on the other side, you can see different levels of needs in terms of physical abilities. And we make every effort to take anybody that our medical team led us to the retreat. We took 33 adolescents and young adults this year, and we're very proud because most of them were new to the service, were newly diagnosed, or on treatment. So big trust from their families as well for them to go to 3 days with us. And when COVID happened, when the pandemic, we had a natural chance to understand or test this belief that if we make it virtual, it will be more available and more utilized. That was not what we found out, but we still had to pivot like everybody else, given that most of my service line is in person and in groups. You can clearly understand the service was quickly shut down, and we had to pivot, and most of the work was done in the inpatient setting, which it was extremely challenging for families to be diagnosed during that time. These are some of the things we did during the pandemic to continue the service, which it was like the first year, I don't know if you remember, all of our patients were missing graduation. So we usually don't do graduation because we really try to get them to participate in one way or the other of their schools. But given that nobody was getting graduation, we did our graduation virtual. It was really fun. And then again, we had Matt Lamson work with us and, do a heavy emphasis on keep moving and nutrition, really paying attention to that because a lot of our patients were more sedentary than before. And pairing with that, we had a wellness challenge that we put out. So, patients could participate in completing the task and then get a prize. So in closing, I think, developing these kind of services under psychosocial umbrella is a really unique and exciting opportunity where part of my work is constantly adjusting and developing. That's why, again, flying while building it. Or building it while flying. There are lots of models there, guideline research, and these are some of the areas that we continue to think are areas of need. Like that's why the design of the service, we definitely have to beef up the part of research because, like I said, the part of the positive aspects, the positive outcomes are not very well represented, as well as our patients are not very well represented. We need systematic methods for implementation because that will create less variability, and it would also help us understand what works and what doesn't, and obviously we need to continue to research and assess the impact of health inequities and health disparities in the things that our population face. Some concrete things to keep in mind, in my opinion, and I think I'm not alone, the AYA population does look like a moving target. Some of the two big areas that are very mobile are the issue of recruiting and messaging with them. For the longest time, it was, if we have social media presence, that will help. And, then chasing the different social media, which at CHLA we're not allowed to do anyhow. So we never got on that wagon. And now we are back to text. So patients now want text. We also don't have that capability yet, but we're working on it. There is a need to pivot frequently. And I think we need to keep our head calm and see, because like I said, what works one year doesn't work the next year. We firmly believe in seeking input. All of my patients know that at the end of each activity, they're going to get a survey, and I want to know, what they found useful, what could be changed, what other things they want to see. So it's very heavy on participation from patients and families. And we need to constantly check our assumptions, and the acquired knowledge, because we think our adolescents and young adults need something, and then when we talk to them, that's not what they need. So we keep the base, but we have to constantly, engage them. Good news, like I say, I really want to emphasize this. Our adolescents and young adults are super resilient. You will hear from them directly, and you will hear it and make the conclusion yourself. They are very capable. They're very altruistic, and they really care about each other and themselves and each other, their families, their siblings. So although the task is very big, I want to remind that every effort counts to improve the quality of life of the patients and families we serve. And I thank you for your attention. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bava, and for sharing some of those unique needs of adolescent and young adult survivors, and the wonderful work that's being done at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. And I'm going to ask folks, if you have a question for Dr. Bava, please go ahead and enter that into the Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and get started with one of mine. So you did talk about, all the wonderful work going at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. But, I'm wondering, in other institutions or healthcare providers or institutions that don't primarily serve adolescents and young adults, what can they better do to tailor survivorship care to meet those diverse needs and preferences of this specific age group, considering, the factors that you mentioned, like fertility, mental health, and education or career goals. So for those institutions that don't, where the whole center doesn't focus on that age group, what can they do?
That's an excellent question. It's a challenging one. This has happened. I've been in contact with organizations, not in LA, for example, in El Paso, that want to do the best they can, but we are a little bit at the ivory tower. That's the reality. We do have access to a number of things here that other institutions that are not as large maybe don't have. I think I would say, what is a priority is already established, and knowing the population. So I think if you do pay attention to those two things and not try to do it all, and also know that even though we are a large institution, we have a lot of resources. Fertility preservation is a problem across the board, and it has to do with this issue of equity, and access and insurance and cost. But despite that, there are other areas that you can focus on. So really it's maximizing what you have. This service is becoming a little bit, not everything that looks shiny, it is gold. And if, for example, with us, we face challenges too. This is a very large center. How do we provide services to, if you think about it, from diagnosis to end of treatment, all the newly diagnosed, but also the ones that become AYA. So we're constantly growing and growing and growing. and we're also, graduating patients. But so I think it's just really paying attention to knowing your population first, understanding what the priorities are, and not trying to reinvent the wheel, and focus on something that you really can make an impact in your community, and work with the centers that do have. So maybe your agency or your institution can do something, but there are a wealth of resources and stuff I share with you that are not based on our private institutions. They are available for everybody.
Thank you so much. And I know that we put some of those resources in the chat, some of those links, like Dr. Bava was saying, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So feel free to, use some of those evidence-based programs that already exist. Now, another question came in. What tends to be the biggest challenge facing adolescent and young adult patients?
Well, like I say, I think one is the sometimes feeling a little bit isolated, but I think it varies. Honestly, I think it varies. And we see an evolution of what is a challenge. For example, 10 years ago, disclosure was a big challenge. Telling your friends. Now we even have TV shows about, adolescents with cancer. So I think it varies. For our patients are those that I indicated, sometimes navigating the healthcare system. I think transition and transfer of care is also a big thing that we're paying attention, but it's also a challenge. And I really wonder what our patients will say later on, what they think it was the biggest challenges. And I think the challenge vary also throughout the treatment.
Yeah.
And them growing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Now, speaking of that, when we talked about support and support in the institution and then support at home, somebody asked, how do you engage and support siblings and parents of those AYA patients?
Thank you for that question. That's the multi-million-dollar question. So we really have, we don't have capacity, for example, to provide individual therapy to siblings or at least in the cancer center, correct? But we can identify and help the families navigate. So a lot of what I'm going to speak for my practice, a lot of the normalizations are really having a conversation about this may come up. This is how the family gets impacted. I think that helps to support, again, being available to triage and to guide families. And what we learned through the workshops is that really having concurrent groups have been very beneficial for when we have a big celebration at the end of the year, the whole family is having fun. So we do what we can. But also, again, I believe very strongly on the power of normalization and triaging. So making people know this is typical, this will pass, this is another resource for you. We really included agencies like Cancer Support Community. We have a resource room here where there is a wealth of resources. So really encouraging families to take part of that. And what I also learned is that with the retreat, for example, most of the parents get really happy when their patients are having a good time. So when we do workshops and they hear the laughter, or the parents are really enjoying that as well. They may not be as happy, maybe because they're discussing something else, but we do what we can. Really.
That's amazing. So the joy they get is from the joy that their child is experiencing, at those events. That's amazing. Now, how can local organizations and professionals better support the AYA population?
I think, again, becoming familiar with checking assumptions and really becoming familiar with some of the literature that is available to read about, and check with your individual, patient and families. Because, for example, many times we explain to our families, you do not need a pediatric psychologist, somebody with expertise on cancer, because they may be having a struggle with social skills, or that were not caused by the cancer, but were exacerbated by the cancer. Or maybe they are, having some concerns about not knowing what to do, or they have really poor habits that again were not caused by the experience but were exacerbated by it, like, or they are not being totally accountable with homework or things like that, that are very typical concerns that are not, so really identifying, hey, this is, the cancer may have done it worse, but this is kind of like a typical developmental concern. So I think that's one way to really ask your patient and family what they need. And most of the time, the needs, except for the beginning of the time where we really heavily provide support here, it tends to be developmental,
Yeah. Yeah, very, very interesting. And like you said, just it doesn't have to be that niche that you're looking for, that there could be, especially with the lack of some healthcare providers, right? It's going to be difficult to find that pediatric, psychologist that focuses on oncology. But I like that you pointed out that it could be that the needs are beyond that, but they were exacerbated by the cancer, but not necessarily directly related to it. Now, our next question comes in. How can we keep AYA motivated to transition to adult services when they are so deeply not wanting to continue to have their cancer narrative?
Okay, that's a tricky one. That's a survivorship question. So here at CHLA, we have the survivorship and support, the survivorship clinic, which is called Life Clinic. So we really try to start early. Motivation is a loaded, word. How do you keep people motivated to seek preventive care? So I think one thing that we do here, we try to start early as possible, again, with the education of these adolescents and young adults of what are some unique things. For those of you, also this is not available in all institutions, but survivorship pertains to the care of everything that had to do with the treatment. So it's like a physical, but for the treatment that they receive. Does that make sense? So things that we know they should pay more attention to. I firmly believe we start early, and the team makes a great job in engaging the teenager and educating and really seeing the value of them being part of it. They may engage in, and the care that they need as an adult will vary depending on the type of cancer they got. Some patients, some people, including our patients, may not want to visit a doctor ever. So we do what we can, but I think if we start early, that's how we can keep and transition responsibility. Really start parents like giving responsibilities back early on, not 18, where when they have to sign everything. So we start early. What's your treatment? What's your name of diagnosis? We do that all the time. What did you get? What you need? Then they're more comfortable with it.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much. And I love the idea of, starting that transition not when they're 18, but early on, kind of getting them used to that idea. And that brings me to our next question. What do you see the future of AYA care looking like?
I don't know. I think, like I said, I think we're going to learn a lot more. I think some aspects are going to remain. Maybe the way we package it may look different, but I think what I'm seeing a trend is that the adolescents and young adults being very bold, very engaged. Before it was like, I don't want to talk about it, that bad thing that happened. And right now is the sense of, that happened and I survived it and I walk. So I think it's really exciting. I don't know what it's going to look like. I think some of the tenants are going to remain the same because of the developmental tasks that they need to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask one more question. And, you brought up, something about technology and social media. And so I want to know, how can technology and telehealth play a role in improving access to care and support for AYA patients, especially in today's digital age? And you kind of brought up COVID and, not having that in-person graduation, but, how can we leverage that technology and telehealth?
I think that is something that we're evaluating now when everything was required to be telehealth. For some people, that is an advantage, and for some people, not. especially when we talk about communities that are underserved. The technology, we have to keep in mind that technology is really not accessible. Like the fact that you have a phone doesn't mean you know how to use the capability of your phone, me included. And also, we see problems with if you share a room with a lot of people, you don't have privacy to have your session. If your internet is spotty, you may get disconnected. So I think we need to remember again the background that we are doing this. So for some people, yeah, great. For others, it's not going to work. And one thing that we learned was I had patients tell me, if you put workshops virtually, I am not going to come. It was such a fatigue effect. They wanted it that in-person interaction, which for me was so refreshing to hear, because I thought once we go virtual, we don't go back. And we actually saw the opposite. We saw less participation, which we never had a problem with participation virtually. So I think it's a mixed bag. Uh, for some people, really work and having available is really wonderful. But also, check and be very skilled how you check, because does your internet work? Do you know how to use, how to connect to Zoom or video or whatever it is that you use? So I think those things remain, and it's not equitable. Absolutely
Yeah.
not equitable.
Absolutely. I like that you brought up, the digital divide, and that not all folks have access, or even know, if they do have the access, how to use it, and or have the bandwidth, right? And we know that the data shows that it's lower income communities that tend to have more expensive and slower bandwidth, compared to other. And there was a huge article, about expanding some of that work into some of the South LA areas and how it got canceled by the governor. But I really, I think we did see that, where especially young adults and adolescents had that fatigue from school, right? Being online all the time and then wanted to be in person. So thank you for addressing that. So
Sorry, and you say social media, but I think, again, I show you some organizations that have been at the forefront of providing things virtually available. So I think, again, don't have to do it all. Who is doing what is working, and making that available for them. Sorry.
or a mix of the two, right? Because you said it's a mixed bag. So offering in person, but then the virtual at the same time for those who can't, right, leave their home and can't go in person, or are immunocompromised, especially now when we're seeing, we're getting into flu season and things like that. So that maybe it's an option, but also the in-person option. So
Yeah.
they could get a little bit of best of both worlds. So thank you so much, Dr. Bava, for that wonderful presentation. And we just want to remind you all that, Cancer Support Community Los Angeles does have a child, teen, and family programs. They have young adult support programs and a monthly young adult game night. So again, like Dr. Bava said, there, take advantage of those resources that are from other organizations, and those are some that you can take advantage of. So we are going to break for lunch now. And I really want to thank Dr. Bava for her wonderful presentation. We're going to take that break, and we will see you all back here at 1 p.m. where Dr. Bava and I will co-facilitate our panel of adolescents and young adults. So see you all at 1 o'clock, and then please enjoy your lunch.